piss your pants.
Look at that!
Come on, we're gonna play.
Do it.
The Last House on the Left wasn't just a horror film. It was a full-on gut punch. A no-budget grindhouse nightmare that blurred the line between cinema and snuff. Directed by Wes Craven in 1972, this movie horrified audiences, shocked critics, and got banned across the globe. But the real story, that's even weirder. From lies, real blood, and manipulation to fake quotes and real chainsaws, these behind-the-scenes stories will leave you wondering how this movie even got made. And trust us, once you know what happened off-camera, you'll never watch it the same way again. Fact 1. The title was a total lie. There's no last house. There's no left, and there's definitely no symbolic road or path to justify the title. Wes Craven admitted the title was pure marketing, designed to sound ominous and mysterious enough to get people into theaters. It had nothing to do with the story, the script, or any element of the movie. In fact, Craven said they brainstormed a list of disturbing-sounding names, and this one just clicked. It sounded like something terrible happened there, even though the main events actually take place in the woods and a regular suburban home. The lie worked. People were drawn in by the vague dread it created. And while it may not make literal sense, it became one of the most iconic and imitated titles in horror history. Studios have been trying to replicate that kind of psychological hook ever since. Fact 2. Wes Craven had never seen a horror film before this. It's almost impossible to believe, but Wes Craven, the man who would go on to create A Nightmare on Elm Street and Scream, had never even seen a horror movie before directing The Last House on the Left. Before this film, he was a college professor with a background in literature, psychology, and philosophy. He even worked editing adult films under a pseudonym just to make ends meet. So when producer Sean S. Cunningham asked him to direct something edgy and shocking, Craven didn't follow horror tropes because he didn't know any. Instead, he pulled from real-life fears, social unrest, and brutal realism. That outsider's perspective gave the film a raw, unpredictable tone. It didn't feel like Hollywood. It felt like something you weren't supposed to see. And that's exactly why it worked. Craven's inexperience made the movie more dangerous. Fact 3. The story is based on a 1960s Swedish art film. Underneath the grime and gore, The Last House on the Left has surprisingly classy roots. Believe it or not, it's a modernized and blood-soaked remake of Ingmar Bergman's 1960 film The Virgin Spring, an Oscar-winning Swedish drama. Bergman's story follows a girl who is raped and murdered and whose killers unknowingly seek shelter in her parents' home. The parents discover the truth and take revenge. Sound familiar? Craven and Cunningham took that same structure but stripped it of its poetic morality and medieval setting. They dropped it in the 1970s America, added violence, and gave it an exploitation film edge. It's wild to think that one of the sleaziest grindhouse films ever made was inspired by European art cinema, but it proves how versatile a revenge story can be, whether you're watching it in a castle or a crumbling farmhouse. Fact 4. The crew was so small, actors helped with lighting. Forget big budgets or fancy trailers. The Last House on the Left was held together with duct tape, literal sweat, and the goodwill of its cast. The crew was so tiny that actors had to help out with lighting rigs, hold boom mics, and even assist with sound recording between takes. On some days, there were fewer than 10 people on set. Scenes were shot without permits, without safety precautions, and sometimes without even a finished script. The actors became roadies, tech crew, and production assistants all in one. And because they were shooting in actual locations like rented houses and real woods, they had to constantly adjust to the environment. This kind of guerrilla filmmaking added a gritty realism to the movie, but it also meant long, chaotic days filled with improvisation and problem solving. That raw, almost documentary-like feel you get when watching it, that's not a filter. That's real. Fact 5. The blood was real, sometimes. In one of the most disturbing scenes in the film, actress Sandra Peabody, who played Mari, was pushed so far emotionally that her reactions turned real. During a take where her character stumbles through the woods in a daze, she slipped on a sharp rock and actually cut herself. Her blood on screen? Not corn syrup, not fake, 100% real. Craven, in true exploitation fashion, told the crew to keep rolling. This wasn't a one-time incident either. Peabody later said she was frequently terrified on set, not just from the content, but from the pressure to deliver emotionally raw performances in unsafe, uncontrolled conditions. The line between acting and reality wasn't just blurred, it was practically erased. And when you watch the film today, those moments of horror hit differently, because sometimes the fear on screen wasn't acted, it was captured. Fact 6. The crew lied about the film's content to the actors. Several actors were given incomplete scripts, or lied to outright, about the tone and subject matter of the movie. Sandra Peabody was told it would be a psychological thriller. Others were told it was a gritty drama. No one mentioned graphic rape scenes, full nudity, or how far the violence would go. When the actors arrived on set and realized what kind of movie it really was, it was too late to back out. David Hess, who played Krug, was one of the few who knew what he was getting into, and even he admitted it was hard to stomach. This tactic wasn't just deceptive, it was strategic. Craven and Cunningham believed that genuine discomfort from the actors would translate into more powerful performances, and while it might have worked on camera, it created a tense, sometimes traumatizing environment behind the scenes. Today, this kind of manipulation would spark lawsuits. In 1972, it was just low-budget filmmaking. Fact 7. The film was shot in reverse order. Because of logistics, budget, and actor availability, The Last House on the Left was filmed almost entirely out of sequence, starting with the final act. That means the scenes of revenge, chainsaw killings, and emotional breakdowns were filmed first, before the rape, the murder, or even the kidnapping scenes. Actors had to tap into emotional climaxes without having filmed the story leading up to them. It's like performing the final act of a play before even reading the beginning. This led to some strange inconsistencies, tone shifts, odd character reactions, but it also forced the cast to stay on edge. They didn't know what was coming next because they hadn't filmed it yet. And in a weird way, that disjointed production style actually fed the film's unhinged tone. Watching it feels disorienting and chaotic. And now you know why? It literally was. Fact 8. It was banned in multiple countries. When The Last House on the Left hit international markets, it didn't just shock, it outraged. The UK banned the film outright, labeling it a video nasty and refusing classification. In Australia, it was denied release completely. In Germany, the censorship board demanded massive edits, and even then it struggled to screen. Some countries didn't just ban it, they made possession of it illegal. Why? Because the film's brutal rape scene, paired with its graphic violence and low-budget realism, felt too much like a snuff film. It didn't look fake. It looked like something you'd find in a police evidence locker, and audiences weren't used to that. Even decades later, censored versions of the film continued to circulate, some with up to 10 minutes missing. In an era where horror was starting to push limits, Last House obliterated them, and that terrified censors worldwide. Fact 9. David Hess wrote the soundtrack and played the villain. David Hess didn't just play the film's most terrifying character, he also composed and performed its oddly upbeat folk soundtrack. That's right, the acoustic guitar strums you hear during Mari's murder scene, written by the guy doing the murdering. Hess was a talented musician before he became a cult horror icon. He had written songs for Elvis Presley and had a music career before taking on the role of Krug. For Last House, he intentionally created a bizarre tonal clash. Light, twangy songs paired with extreme brutality. The goal was to unsettle you, to make you feel like you were watching something cheerful as something horrific happened. That jarring emotional collision became a defining trait of the movie, and it all came from the twisted brain of the villain himself. Talk about duality. Fact 10. The most disturbing scene was improvised. One of the most uncomfortable and distressing moments in the film wasn't in the script at all. During the scene where Krug humiliates Mari by telling her to wet herself, actor David Hess went off script and pushed Sandra Peabody far beyond her comfort zone. Craven didn't yell, "Cut!" He let it unfold. Peabody, clearly distressed, later said she felt trapped and humiliated. The horror on her face wasn't acting, it was real. Hess was known for his intense, method-style acting and believed that blurring reality and fiction would bring out something more authentic, but it left scars on the actors. Peabody has since expressed how traumatic that experience was, and many horror fans today recognize that the line between performance and abuse may have been crossed. The scene remains one of the most controversial in exploitation film history, and knowing it wasn't planned makes it even harder to watch. Fact 11. The film was originally rated X. When Craven submitted the film to the MPAA, it was slapped with an X rating. Not because of sex, but because of the sheer brutality. The rape, the gore, and the relentless emotional terror all pushed it over the edge. An X rating in 1972 didn't mean what it does today. It was the kiss of death for distribution. Many theaters wouldn't touch an X-rated film unless it was pornographic, and advertisers wouldn't promote it. Craven trimmed several scenes, removing frames of blood spray, shortening the stabbing, dialing back the audio on screams, but even the R-rated version still shocked people. The fact that a horror movie could be rated X for violence alone was groundbreaking at the time. It set a precedent for how future films like The Exorcist and Texas Chainsaw Massacre would be judged and censored. The X rating made it infamous, but also limited its audience, until it became legend. Fact 12, the cops were played for laughs on purpose. In the middle of one of the grimmest, most horrifying films of the 1970s, Craven inserted two bumbling, almost cartoonish cops. They lose their car, they hitchhike with a chicken truck, and they basically wander cluelessly while all the real violence unfolds. It feels jarringly out of place. And that was the point. Craven wanted to mock authority figures, suggesting that the people meant to protect you are often too slow or inept to help. It was a subtle political statement about police during the Vietnam and Civil Rights era when many Americans had lost faith in institutions. But not everyone got the message. Many viewers were confused or annoyed by the sudden tonal shift, the movie whiplash between torture and slapstick. Today, this weird blend of horror and black comedy is a signature Craven move. He used it again in Scream, but this was the first attempt, and it was polarizing. Fact 13. The house used in the film was literally falling apart. The title might have been fictional, but the house they filmed in was very real, and it was a disaster. Located in rural New York, the house was a run-down rental with no working plumbing, moldy walls, and a rodent problem. The production didn't build a set or fix it up. They shot it as is, which meant actors were often dealing with freezing temperatures, live wires, and broken furniture. In one scene, a character slams a door and part of the frame crumbles. That wasn't planned. The cast and crew were constantly improvising around structural hazards, but that dilapidated environment added authenticity to the film. It didn't look fake because it wasn't. It looked like a real family home that had become a slaughterhouse. That kind of visual honesty, accidental or not, is part of what made Last House so unsettling. You weren't watching a set. You were watching decay. Fact 14. Wes Craven kept a bucket for vomit on set. You'd think a horror director would have a stomach for this kind of thing. But during production, Wes Craven kept a literal bucket on set in case he needed to throw up. And according to crew accounts, he used it. Craven was deeply disturbed by the scenes he was creating, especially the sexual violence. He wasn't a sadist. He didn't enjoy filming that material. He did it because he believed the audience needed to be shocked into discomfort, to feel the same helplessness the characters felt. Craven later admitted he feared he'd gone too far, especially after watching raw footage of the rape scene. That bucket wasn't just a prop, it was a symbol of how even the creator of this nightmare wasn't immune to its effects, and yet he finished the film because he believed horror should horrify, no matter the cost. Fact 15. Some prints were purposely destroyed. Back in the 70s, not every theater owner was on board with showing The Last House on the Left. In fact, after screening the film, some projectionists and managers were so horrified that they physically destroyed their copies of the movie. We're talking scissors to film reels, hammers to canisters, and some prints even being burned or thrown out. One theater reportedly cut out the rape scene during a showing, right in the middle of the film, leaving audiences confused by the sudden jump in continuity. Over time, these cuts created a weird legacy. Because each destroyed or censored print was slightly different, early VHS and bootleg copies varied dramatically. Some versions were missing full scenes, others had distorted sound, and many horror collectors today still argue about what constitutes the definitive cut. It wasn't until decades later that restorations attempted to piece together the full version, but the damage was done, literally. Fact 16. The film's poster used a fake quote. The film's poster is almost as famous as the movie itself. Bold black letters, a terrified girl's face, and the chilling tagline. To avoid fainting, keep repeating. It's only a movie, only a movie. It looked like a quote from a horrified critic, but here's the truth. It was 100% fake. There was no review, no source, no journalist behind it. The tagline was created by the film's marketing team to capitalize on the controversy, and it worked like a charm. Audiences walked in already primed to be terrified. The phrase became so iconic that it was reused in trailers, merchandise, and even the 2009 remake. It blurred the line between marketing and myth. People assumed someone had actually fainted. In reality, the only thing that passed out was the truth. That quote was a masterstroke of exploitation cinema, selling the idea of terror more than the film itself. Fact 17. Sandra Peabody almost quit mid-film. Sandra Peabody, who played Mari, endured some of the film's most traumatizing scenes, and it pushed her to the breaking point. Between the real injuries, the emotional distress, and David Hess's intense method acting, she came close to quitting the film multiple times. Peabody has since said she felt scared, not just for her character, but for herself. She was a young actress with no idea how graphic the scenes would become. In one instance, she walked off set in tears and refused to come back until the director promised to scale things back. But with the production operating on a shoestring budget and tight schedule, there wasn't much time or sympathy for her concerns. Craven reportedly talked her down gently, but Hess, who stayed in character as Krug even off camera, made her feel constantly unsafe. It's a reminder that making horror can be horrifying, especially when boundaries are blurred. Fact 18. The film's final kill was an accident. The chainsaw finale is one of the most memorable and chaotic scenes in the entire film, but what most people don't realize is that a real functioning chainsaw was used with no safety measures in place. During the climactic moment where the father confronts Krug, actor Richard Towers came dangerously close to slicing David Hess for real. The blade missed by inches. Hess's panic in that scene? Totally real. He wasn't acting. He was trying not to die. Craven later admitted that they didn't have the budget for props or stunt doubles. They were winging it, hoping no one got hurt. But that danger is part of what gives the scene its raw energy. You can see the fear in Hess's eyes as he stumbles backward, sweating and screaming. That's not special effects. That's survival instinct. In today's film world, this would be a lawsuit waiting to happen. But in 1972, that was just a typical day on set. Fact 19. A sequel was planned and then scrapped. After the unexpected financial success of The Last House on the Left, producers floated the idea of a direct sequel. The plot would have followed Krug's brother or another family member seeking revenge for his death. It would have flipped the script, this time with the killer's kin tracking down the parents. Some early treatments were written, and Craven even entertained a few pitches. But the backlash from the first film was so intense, especially in Europe and the US, that nobody wanted to touch it. Distributors feared it would be too toxic to release, and Craven himself had no interest in revisiting that kind of brutality again so soon. Instead, he channeled those dark ideas into The Hills Have Eyes and then later A Nightmare on Elm Street. The sequel was shelved indefinitely, and the idea faded. But die-hard fans still wonder what that alternate timeline would have looked like if The House on the Left had stayed open for business. Fact 20. The remake was a bit more tame, but still banned in some places. In 2009, a glossy, higher-budget remake of The Last House on the Left was released, this time with slick cinematography, a bigger cast, and more mainstream polish. But even with all the visual upgrades and a more heroic revenge arc, the remake still managed to get banned in countries like Malaysia. The UK and Australia issued heavy content warnings and demanded cuts. Why? Because even though it softened the gritty aesthetic, The core story was still too disturbing: abduction, rape, home invasion, and murder. The fact that these themes were presented in high definition didn't make them more palatable. It made them harder to ignore. Craven produced the remake, saying it was his way of updating the story for a new generation, but the original shadow loomed large. The remake did well financially, but critics were divided. It proved one thing: no matter how much you polish the house on the left, it's still standing in blood. Whether you consider The Last House on the Left a brutal masterpiece or a disturbing mess, there's no denying its impact. It shocked an entire generation of moviegoers and helped launch the careers of horror legends. Behind the shaky camera work and chaotic tone lies a deeper truth. This film was never just a movie. It was a scream against complacency, a punch in the gut, and a challenge to what cinema could get away with. And if anyone ever tells you it's only a movie, well, they probably haven't seen this one.